The silence before thunder. The galaxy had never taken humanity seriously. 463 years since Earth's first colony ship limped into charted space, the older civilizations treated humans like children who had stumbled into a room full of adults. The Galactic Assembly dismissed human representatives with polite smiles and empty promises. Trade consortiums refused Earth's goods, claiming they lacked quality. Military alliances ignored human applications, stating that Earth's vessels were too fragile for real combat. Commander Elena Vasquez had grown up hearing these dismissals. As a girl on Mars colony, she watched news broadcasts of her father returning from failed diplomatic missions, his face heavy with frustration. He had been an ambassador then, trying to secure trade agreements that would help humanity's struggling outer colonies. He died when Elena was 16, still fighting for recognition that never came. Now, at 42 years old, Elena stood on the bridge of the EDS Valiant, humanity's newest and most powerful warship. Her reflection in the viewport showed a woman with short black hair streaked with gray, dark eyes that had seen too many friends die in border skirmishes, and a jaw set with determination that had carried her through 24 years of military service. Behind her, the bridge crew worked in focused silence, their fingers dancing across holographic displays that glowed blue and amber in the dim light. Captain James Chin approached from the tactical station, a data pad in his weathered hands. He was 51, older than Elena by nearly a decade, with the calm bearing of a man who had commanded destroyers through the resource wars of the Outer Rim. His uniform bore the scars of a long career, patched and repatched where plasma fire had nearly ended his life 3 times. "Commander, the fleet reports ready," James said quietly. "All 157 vessels accounted for. Every ship we could pull from patrol duty, training missions and reserve status. This is everything Earth has that can fly and fight." Elena took the datapad and scanned the numbers. 157 ships against a force intelligence estimated at over 900. Destroyers, frigates, carriers and support craft, all pulled together in a fleet that represented humanity's entire military capability. If they lost this battle, Earth would be defenseless for years. "What about the Therian situation?" Elena asked, though she already knew the answer would be grim. James pulled up a holographic display between them. A planet hung in the air, beautiful and blue, its surface marked with the lights of cities that had stood for thousands of years. Around it, red icons swarmed like angry insects. "The Krell Empire has been bombarding population centers for 6 hours. Latest estimates suggest 4 million dead, with that number climbing every hour. The Therian defense fleet was destroyed in the opening minutes of the attack." Elena studied the display with a heavy heart. The Therian were a peaceful species, known throughout the galaxy for their art and philosophy. They had no standing military beyond a token defense force. Their crime had been refusing to surrender their mineral-rich system to the Krell Empire, one of the oldest and most brutal civilizations in known space. And the Galactic Assembly's response? Elena already knew this answer too, but she needed to hear it said aloud. "Emergency session concluded 3 hours ago," James said, his voice carrying barely contained anger. "They issued a formal condemnation and called for immediate peace talks. No one volunteered to send military support. The VRYN Confederation expressed concern. The Xelon Unity offered to mediate negotiations. The Assembly praised the Therian for their courage and urged them to consider the Krell's terms. They're going to let 4 billion people die," Elena said flatly. "The Assembly believes military intervention would escalate the situation," James replied. "They're afraid of the Krell. Everyone is." Elena turned away from the display and looked out at the assembled fleet. Her fleet. Every ship represented hundreds of lives, thousands of families back home who would receive folded flags if this went wrong. Earth's government had not authorized this mission. In fact, they had explicitly ordered her to stand down when she proposed it. But Elena had sent out a message to every ship captain in Earth's Navy anyway, asking for volunteers to join an unsanctioned rescue operation. Every single captain had said yes. Lieutenant Sarah Okonkwo stood at the fighter operations console, her dark fingers flying across controls as she coordinated the launch schedules for all carrier groups. She was 31, the youngest senior officer on the bridge, but she had earned her position by being the finest combat pilot Elena had ever seen. She had painted small stars on the side of her fighter for every kill, and after the Proxima incursion she had run out of room. "Commander, fighter wings report ready for deployment," Sarah said without looking up. "We've got 643 birds ready to fly. Pilots are strapped in and waiting for the word. 643 fighters against thousands. The Krell favored massive warships with thick armor and devastating weapons, but intelligence suggested their fighter screens were relatively light. It was one of the few advantages humanity might have. Human fighters were fast, agile, and flown by pilots who had trained in Earth's unforgiving gravity wells. "Keep them on standby," Elena ordered. "We jump in 15 minutes. She opened a fleet-wide channel, and her voice carried to every ship, every ready room, every engine compartment where crews made final preparations. "This is Commander Vasquez. I won't waste time with speeches about duty or honor. You all know why we're here. Down on that planet, 4 billion people are dying while the galaxy watches and does nothing. We're going to do something." She paused, gathering her thoughts. The Krell Empire has conquered 47 species in their 1,000-year history. They've never lost a war. They have 900 ships in that system to our 157. Every tactical analysis says we can't win this fight. Across the fleet, crews listened in silence. Some prayed. Some checked their weapons one more time. Some looked at photos of loved ones they might never see again. "But the Krell have never fought humans before," Elena continued, her voice growing harder. "They don't know that we're the species that crawled out of caves and conquered our entire world. They don't know that we split the atom, walked on our moon, and reached the stars despite every setback and disaster. They don't know that when we decide something is worth fighting for, we don't quit until we win or there's nothing left of us to fight with." She looked around her bridge at the faces of her crew. Young and old, from Earth and Mars and the colonies beyond, all united by the simple belief that standing by while innocents died was not an option. "Today we show the Krell what happens when they make the mistake of underestimating humanity. Today we show the galaxy that some species still believe in protecting the weak. All ships jump in 10 minutes. Weapons free upon arrival. Let's bring those people home." The channel closed, and the bridge erupted in quiet activity as final preparations accelerated. Elena walked to her command chair and sat down, her hands gripping the armrests. Beside her, James Chin took his position at the tactical station, his experienced fingers already plotting firing solutions for threats they hadn't even seen yet. "Elena," James said quietly, using her first name for the first time in months. "If this goes wrong, Earth will court-martial us. They might execute us for treason." "If this goes wrong, we'll be dead anyway," Elena replied. "But if we do nothing and those 4 billion people die, I won't be able to live with myself. Will you?" James smiled grimly. "No. No, I won't." Across the fleet, jump drives began to charge. The massive engines that bent space-time itself hummed with building energy. In the fighter bays, Sarah Okonkwo climbed into her cockpit and sealed her helmet. In the engine rooms, crews monitored power flows and made adjustments. In the medical bays, doctors and nurses prepared for casualties they hoped wouldn't come. Admiral Marcus Stone sat in his office on Earth, 700 light-years away, and watched a real-time feed from a spy satellite. He was 73 years old, the senior-most officer in Earth's military, and officially he had ordered Elena's fleet to stand down. Unofficially, he had made sure every ship she needed was available and ready. When the politicians came for him afterward, he would tell them the truth. Sometimes following orders meant letting evil triumph, and he had not joined the military to watch genocide happen. The countdown reached 0. 157 human warships vanished in flashes of twisted light, their jump drives tearing holes in spacetime that snapped shut behind them. They traveled through dimensions that human minds couldn't comprehend, crossing distances that should have taken years in a handful of heartbeats. They emerged in the Therian system 30 seconds later. The first thing Elena saw was the planet. Therian Prime hung in space like a jewel, but its beauty was marred by the orange glow of fires that could be seen from orbit. Entire cities were burning. The second thing she saw was the Krell fleet. "Mother of God," James whispered. The tactical display lit up with so many red icons that they almost merged into a solid mass. 937 enemy vessels, ranging from frigates the size of city blocks to dreadnoughts that dwarfed Earth's largest buildings. They were arranged in a crescent formation around the planet, their weapons systematically reducing population centers to rubble. "They're not even in a defensive posture," Sarah's voice came over the comm. "They're just sitting there bombarding the surface. They don't think anyone's going to stop them." Elena felt rage boil up inside her chest. The Krell weren't fighting a war. They were conducting an execution, and they were so confident in their superiority that they hadn't even bothered to post guards. "All ships, attack formation Delta," Elena ordered, her voice cold as ice. "Fighters launch immediately. Target their command ships and weapons platforms. Show them what a mistake looks like." The human fleet surged forward like a pack of wolves descending on prey. Fighter craft erupted from carrier bays in perfect waves, 643 small craft that immediately broke into hunting groups. The destroyers and frigates accelerated to attack speed, their railguns already charging. On the Krell flagship Domination of Stars, Overlord Craxus was reviewing bombardment efficiency reports when his sensors officer began shouting in alarm. Craxus looked up from his datapad in annoyance. He was a massive being, nearly 3 meters tall, with 4 arms and thick armor plating that covered his body like natural tank armor. His species had ruled their empire for a millennium, and in all that time, no one had ever dared to interrupt him during a conquest. "What is the meaning of this disturbance?" Craxus demanded. "Overlord, we have multiple contacts emerging from jump," the sensors officer stammered. "Unknown ships. They're attacking us." Craxus walked to the main display with the slow confidence of someone who had never faced a real threat. He looked at the tactical plot and saw the small fleet of human ships racing toward his forces. He began to laugh, a deep rumbling sound that made his bridge crew shift nervously. "These are the humans?" Craxus said, still laughing. "The primitives who can barely maintain their own colonies? They dare to challenge the Krell Empire?" His weapons officer, a younger male named Vrex, studied his display with growing concern. "Overlord, they're moving very fast. Their approach vectors don't match any known combat doctrine. Should we raise shields and prepare to engage?" "No," Craxus said dismissively. "Let them come. Let them see the futility of their gesture before we crush them. Maybe the galaxy will finally learn that defying the Krell brings only death." That was his first mistake. His second mistake was assuming that the humans would fight like everyone else the Krell had conquered. His third and final mistake was underestimating the rage of a species that had spent its entire existence fighting for survival against impossible odds. The human fleet reached weapons range, and Elena gave the order that changed the galaxy forever. "All ships, fire at will." 2,000 railgun rounds, each traveling at a significant fraction of light speed, crossed the distance in seconds. The Krell shields, designed to deflect energy weapons, offered no resistance to solid projectiles moving at relativistic speeds. The rounds punched through shields, through armor, through the hulls of ships that had conquered dozens of species. 47 Krell vessels exploded in the first salvo. The battle had begun, and the Krell Empire was about to learn a lesson written in fire and fury. Humanity had arrived and they were done being dismissed. Part 2: When Titans Fell. The Krell Empire had fought wars for over 1,000 years, and in all that time, they had never experienced what happened in the first 30 seconds of the Battle of Therion Prime. Their massive warships, vessels that had bombarded entire worlds into submission, began exploding in rapid succession as human railgun rounds tore through their hulls like paper. Overlord Craxus stood frozen on the bridge of the Domination of Stars, watching his fleet die on the tactical display. Red icons winked out one after another, each representing a warship and hundreds of lives. His 4 hands gripped the command console until the metal groaned under the pressure. "Impossible," he whispered. "This is impossible." His weapons officer Vrex was already working frantically at his station. "Overlord, their projectiles are moving too fast for our shields to register them as threats. The defensive systems are calibrated for energy weapons. These kinetic rounds are passing straight through. Then recalibrate the shields." Craxus roared, his voice echoing through the bridge. "That will take at least 10 minutes, Overlord. We don't have." Another group of Krell cruisers exploded on the display, their reactor cores going critical and taking nearby vessels with them. Vrex's words died in his throat. "Raise all shields to maximum," Craxus ordered, forcing calm into his voice. "Order all vessels to break formation and engage the enemy. Show these primitives the power of the Krell Empire." The command went out across the fleet, and 900 surviving warships began to move. But they moved according to Krell military doctrine, a system of tactics that had been refined over centuries of conquest. They formed into battle groups, designated targets based on threat assessment, and began the formal process of engagement that had won them 47 wars. The humans ignored every rule of civilized warfare and simply kept killing. Commander Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the Valiant, watching the battle unfold with fierce satisfaction. The Krell were trying to organize, trying to respond with their traditional tactics, but humanity had no interest in fighting fairly. "Captain Chin, status report," Elena ordered. James Chin looked up from his tactical station, his face illuminated by the glow of countless displays. "We've destroyed or disabled 89 enemy vessels. 0 casualties on our side. The Krell are attempting to form defensive formations, but their ships are too large and slow to respond effectively to our attack patterns. Elena nodded. Humanity had learned warfare in the gravity well of Earth, where every maneuver cost fuel and every mistake meant death. Human ships were smaller, faster, and designed by a species that had spent thousands of years finding better ways to kill each other. The Krell had size and power, but humanity had speed and adaptability. Tell all ships to maintain attack pattern Gamma, Elena said. Keep hitting their command vessels and weapons platforms. Don't give them time to think. In the fighter bays, Lieutenant Sarah Okonkwo led her squadron through the Krell formation like a blade through flesh. Her fighter was a sleek predator, all sharp angles and raw power, and she flew it with the instinct of someone who had been born for this. Behind her, 23 other pilots followed her lead, trusting her completely. Ghost Squadron, this is Ghost Leader. Sarah's voice came over the comm, steady and professional despite the chaos around her. Target that dreadnought at bearing 270. Weapons free on my mark. The Krell dreadnought was a monster, 3 kilometers of armor and guns that had reduced the Therian defense stations to scrap in the opening minutes of the invasion. Its point defense systems tracked the approaching fighters and opened fire, filling space with streams of plasma that could vaporize a small craft instantly. Sarah dove through the fire with movements that seemed to defy physics, her fighter twisting and rolling as plasma bolts passed within meters of her hull. Her targeting computer locked onto the dreadnought's bridge tower, a vulnerable point where the ship's command and control systems were concentrated. Mark, she said calmly and pressed the trigger. 24 missiles launched simultaneously, each one guided by artificial intelligence that had been trained on 1,000 simulations. They wove through the defensive fire like dancers, too fast and too agile for the Krell gunners to track. 18 of them reached their target. The dreadnought's bridge tower exploded in a ball of fire that could be seen from the planet's surface. The massive ship began to list to one side, its engines firing randomly as automated systems tried to compensate for the loss of command control. Splash 1 dreadnought, Sarah reported. Ghost Squadron, form up on me. Let's find another target. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out dozens of times. Human destroyers worked in pairs, one drawing fire while the other struck from an unexpected angle. Frigates made high-speed runs through enemy formations, their railguns firing non-stop until their barrels glowed red with heat. Carriers launched wave after wave of fighters and bombers, overwhelming Krell point defenses with sheer numbers. The Krell fought back with everything they had. Their energy weapons were devastating when they hit, capable of cutting human ships in half with single shots. But they had to hit first, and the humans refused to sit still long enough to make easy targets. On the bridge of the destroyer EDS Hammer, Captain Rebecca Torres watched her tactical officer coordinate firing solutions with mechanical precision. Rebecca was 47, a career officer who had commanded destroyers for 12 years, and she had never seen anything like this battle. Target acquired, her tactical officer announced. Krell battleship, bearing 185, range 30,000 kilometers. Fire, Rebecca ordered without hesitation. The Hammer's main railgun spoke with a sound like thunder, sending a tungsten penetrator downrange at velocities that turned it into a weapon of apocalyptic power. The round crossed 30,000 kilometers in less than a second and struck the Krell battleship directly amidships. The kinetic energy of the impact was equivalent to a small nuclear weapon. The battleship's spine broke like a tree branch, and the vessel split into 2 pieces that tumbled away in different directions, atmosphere and debris streaming from the wound. Direct hit, the tactical officer reported. Target destroyed. Find another one, Rebecca said. We're not done yet. But the Krell were beginning to adapt. Overlord Kraxus had survived the initial shock and was now doing what his species did best, applying overwhelming force to crush opposition. He had reorganized his remaining fleet into 3 massive groups, each one designed to concentrate fire on the human ships and destroy them through sheer firepower. All vessels, focus fire on the enemy flagship, Kraxus ordered, pointing one of his massive hands at the tactical display where the Valiant was marked. Kill their commander and the rest will fall apart. 300 Krell warships turned their weapons toward Elena's ship. The amount of energy they released in the next 10 seconds was enough to sterilize a small moon. Plasma beams, particle cannons, and kinetic missiles converged on the Valiant from every direction. Brace for impact, James Chin shouted. The Valiant's shields flared brilliant white as they absorbed energy that would have vaporized an unprotected ship instantly. But the shields were designed by human engineers who understood that the best defense was not standing still. The ship's computer automatically fired maneuvering thrusters, throwing the vessel into a violent roll that carried it away from the worst of the fire. Elena held onto her chair with both hands as the deck bucked beneath her. Alarms screamed across the bridge and several displays exploded in showers of sparks. The lights flickered and died, replaced by emergency lighting that cast everything in red. Damage report. Elena shouted over the noise. Shields down to 40%, James called back. Forward armor compromised. We've got fires on decks 7 through 9. Casualty reports coming in now. Elena's jaw tightened. This was the price of war, the cost that had to be paid. But she had known it was coming and she had accepted it when she gave the order to jump. Redirect all auxiliary power to shields, she ordered. And get me a firing solution on that flagship. Commander, if we engage the flagship directly, we'll draw even more fire, James warned. That's the idea, Captain. If they're shooting at us, they're not shooting at anyone else. Now get me that firing solution. James worked his console for a moment, then nodded. Solution locked. All forward batteries ready. Fire everything. The Valiant unleashed every weapon it had. Railguns, missiles, particle beams, and kinetic torpedoes all launched simultaneously, creating a wave of destruction that crossed the space between the two flagships in seconds. The domination of stars was massive and heavily armored, but even it couldn't withstand that much firepower at once. Craxus watched the incoming fire on his display and knew he had made a critical error. He had underestimated these humans, dismissed them as primitives who couldn't possibly threaten the Krell Empire. Now his flagship was about to pay for that arrogance. Evasive maneuvers, he roared, but it was far too late. The Valiant's weapons struck the domination of stars across its entire length. Armor plating vaporized under particle beams. Railgun rounds punched through decks and compartments, each one creating a tunnel of destruction through the ship. Missiles found weak points and detonated inside the hull, their shaped charges designed to create maximum internal damage. The bridge of the domination of stars exploded as a kinetic torpedo struck it directly. Craxus had one moment to realize he had lost, and then he ceased to exist. The death of their commander threw the Krell fleet into chaos. Without Craxus's iron will holding them together, the individual ship captains began making their own decisions. Some tried to continue the fight. Others attempted to flee. A few simply shut down their weapons and waited to see what would happen. Elena saw the shift immediately. All ships press the attack. Don't give them time to reorganize. The human fleet surged forward with renewed fury. Now it wasn't just about winning the battle, it was about ending the threat completely. Ship after ship fell to human weapons, and the Krell formation collapsed into scattered groups that were picked apart one by one. In her fighter, Sarah led Ghost Squadron on a final attack run against a Krell carrier that was trying to launch its own fighters. She had been flying for nearly 3 hours now, and her body ached from the constant high-G maneuvers, but she pushed the discomfort aside and focused on her target. Ghost Squadron, concentrate fire on those launch bays, she ordered. Let's keep their birds on the ground. 24 fighters dove toward the carrier, their weapons blazing. The Krell point defenses managed to shoot down 3 of them before the rest reached firing range, but the survivors delivered their payload with devastating accuracy. Explosions rippled across the carrier's hull as fighter bays detonated, taking fully fueled and armed craft with them. Sarah pulled up hard, her fighter screaming in protest as she pushed it to the edge of its capabilities. Behind her, the Krell carrier broke apart, its internal explosions tearing it into pieces. Ghost Leader, this is Ghost 7. A voice came over the comm. It belonged to Lieutenant Marcus Webb, one of her wingmen. I'm picking up distress signals from the planet's surface. Sounds like Therian civilians trapped in collapsed shelters. Sarah felt her stomach twist. They had been so focused on the battle that she had almost forgotten why they were here. Down on that planet, billions of people were still dying while the Krell bombardment continued. Ghost Leader to Valiant, Sarah transmitted. We're picking up civilian distress signals from multiple locations on the surface. Request permission to break off and provide air support. Elena's response came immediately. Permission granted, Ghost Leader. Take your squadron down and do what you can. We'll finish things up here. Sarah turned her fighter toward the planet and increased speed. Behind her, the rest of Ghost Squadron followed without question. They had come here to save lives, and the battle in space meant nothing if they couldn't protect the people on the ground. As they descended through the atmosphere, Sarah saw the true scale of the devastation. Entire cities had been reduced to rubble. Fires burned across thousands of square kilometers. The beautiful blue planet she had seen from orbit was now covered in clouds of smoke and ash. But there were also signs of resistance. Small groups of Therian were fighting back with whatever weapons they could find, trying to protect their families from Krell ground forces. Sarah spotted one group pinned down by a Krell gunship and immediately changed course to intercept. "Ghost 7, Ghost 9, you're with me," she ordered. "The rest of you spread out and find more targets. Let's show these people they're not alone anymore." The three fighters dove through the smoke, their targeting systems locking onto the Krell gunship. Sarah waited until she was close enough to see the individual weapons ports, then opened fire with everything she had. The gunship exploded in a ball of fire, and the Therian survivors below looked up in shock and wonder. For the first time in hours they had hope. Back in space, the battle was entering its final phase. The Krell fleet, which had numbered over 900 ships at the start of the engagement, was now reduced to fewer than 200. Those that remained were scattered and demoralized, many of them trying desperately to jump away to safety. Elena gave the order she had been waiting to give since the battle began. "All ships, cease fire. Let them go." James looked at her in surprise. "Commander, we have them beaten. We could destroy the rest of their fleet." "We could," Elena agreed. "But we didn't come here to commit genocide. We came here to stop one. The Krell who want to flee can flee. The ones who want to surrender can surrender. But anyone who continues to attack Therian civilians will be destroyed without mercy." The message went out across all frequencies, translated into Krell by the ship's computer. For a long moment nothing happened. Then one by one the surviving Krell ships began to lower their shields and power down their weapons. A few tried to jump away and Elena let them go. They would carry the story of this battle back to the Krell Empire, and that story would matter more than a few destroyed ships. Within an hour, the Battle of Therian Prime was over. The human fleet had lost 19 ships and suffered damage to 40 more. 3,217 humans had died, and another 6,000 were wounded. But they had saved a civilization. On the planet's surface, rescue operations began immediately. Human medical teams transported down to help treat wounded Therian. Engineers worked to clear rubble and restore power. Fighters patrolled the skies, protecting against any remaining Krell ground forces. General Thren, the commander of what remained of the Therian Defense Forces, met Elena in person 3 days after the battle. He was a tall being with blue skin and large eyes that held a mixture of gratitude and sorrow. His uniform was torn and stained with blood, but he stood straight and proud. "Commander Vasquez," Thren said in careful English, "my people owe you a debt that can never be repaid. You came when no one else would. You risked everything to save strangers. Why?" Elena thought about the question for a long moment. She thought about her father, who had spent his life trying to earn humanity's place in the galaxy through diplomacy. She thought about the 3,000 humans who had died in this battle, each one leaving behind families who would mourn them. She thought about the 4 billion Therian who would live to see another day because humanity had decided that some things were worth fighting for. "Because it was the right thing to do," Elena said simply. "Because we believe that the strong have a responsibility to protect the weak. Because if we had done nothing, we wouldn't be able to live with ourselves." Thren's eyes glistened with tears. "The galaxy will hear of what happened here. They will know that humanity stood when everyone else turned away. You have changed everything, Commander. The old rules, the old alliances, none of them matter anymore. You have shown us what true courage looks like." 3 months later, Elena stood in the Galactic Assembly Hall for the first time. The last time a human had been allowed to speak here, they had been laughed out of the room. Today the hall was silent as she walked to the central podium. Representatives from hundreds of species watched her with expressions ranging from respect to fear to anger. The Krell Empire had filed formal protests, demanding that humanity be punished for unprovoked aggression. But their words fell on deaf ears. Too many species had watched the Therian face extinction while the assembly did nothing. Elena didn't waste time with pleasantries or diplomatic language. She looked around the hall and spoke with the same directness she used with her crew. 3 months ago, 4 billion people were dying while you debated and discussed and issued statements. Humanity acted. We paid for that action with 3,000 lives. But we would do it again. We will do it again, anytime the strong prey on the weak and the galaxy looks away. She paused, letting her words sink in. Humanity is done asking for permission to do what's right. We are done being dismissed and ignored. We are here now and we're not going anywhere. Any species that wants to work toward a galaxy where justice matters is welcome to join us. Anyone who wants to continue the old ways should know that we will stand in your way. The hall erupted in arguments and shouts, but Elena simply turned and walked out. She had said what needed to be said. What the assembly did with those words was up to them. On Earth, Admiral Marcus Stone watched the broadcast with a smile on his weathered face. The politicians had tried to court-martial Elena, just as predicted. But when they saw the outpouring of support from Earth's population and the flood of applications to join the military, they had quietly dropped the charges. Humanity had found its place in the galaxy at last. Not through diplomacy or trade, but through the simple act of standing up when everyone else sat down. And the galaxy would never forget the day a human armada entered a war zone they had no obligation to fight in, and changed everything.